Sarah Atherton, Conservative MP for Wrexham. You were elected in 2019. Tell me a little bit about your upbringing.
Yes, well, my mother was, or mam, as we say in Wales, was from Carnarvon. She didn't speak English till she went to school. She's from a very well-known Covey family, the Stringer family. My father was a Methodist, came from a family of builders, and I was brought up in Chester. But like everyone who lives in Wrexham, in Chester, in North East Wales, you know, we live in a wide geographical area, so we dip in and out of England, we dip in and out of Wales. So I had a lovely upbringing. I went to school in Chester, spent all my holidays in a caravan, either in Carnarvon or Porthmadog, and every Saturday as a child, I used to go to the local swimming pool in Wrexham whilst my mum went to the market. So I had a lovely childhood.
Good. You are the first female MP to have served in the armed forces. You left school at 16 and signed up. Tell me what you did in the army.
I was in the intelligence corps. So I actually walked into a recruitment office, and we don't have too many of them anymore, but I walked into a recruitment office, a little bit lost with life. I'd worked in boots when I left school. I'd travelled a bit around Europe. I'd gone to Berlin, and that had really pricked my imagination about the military. And I came back and I wanted to be a red cap. I wanted to go to Royal Military Police. So I did my assessments, and they said, no, you're going to go to the intelligence corps, which delighted my parents massively. So I joined up and I was in the army for 4 years.
In July 2021, and this is going to form the bulk of the interview, you chaired the Defence Subcommittee on Women in the Armed Forces. It produced a damning report into the experience of women in the military. You heard from women who serve and who have served. You heard cases of serious sexual assault, rape, gang rape, and cover-up. Is there a case, or perhaps two, that particularly stick in your mind?
Yes, I went to meet some serving personnel and some veterans at a charity in the North East called Salute Her, which, out of the 1,800 veterans charities and service charities we have, that's the only one that's specifically dedicated to supporting women. And that was the only charity that would help me whilst I was collecting this evidence for the subcommittee. And I met a lady there who had been gang raped with an implement. And she had really poor experience of trying to complain, poor experience of support, poor experience of victim support. She eventually left the military and her life's in tatters because she's now dipping into the NHS system, can't get the right level of support. Therefore, the rest of her life has been impacted by what happened during that time. That was probably the worst case, and I will remember it going forward. But I have to say, most women have really good experiences in the military. And in fact, our report said 9 out of 10 women enjoyed their experience, as I did. And what I didn't want to do when I embarked on this report was to turn women off a career in the military. And I think that hasn't happened. So, you know, the military is fantastic. The opportunities are endless. But what I did find is when it went wrong, it went very wrong.
I think that story will stay with all of us forever. You found 64% of female veterans, 58% of currently serving women reported experiencing bullying, harassment or discrimination during their careers. Were you shocked at those figures?
I was shocked with the whole report. We had no idea what we were going to find and the scope and the sheer quantity of evidence that came forward. I was asked to do it by Tobias Elwood, who was the chair, and the clerk also at the time, because women had consistently been overrepresented in the complaint system, and recruitment was consistently down. We encouraged the MOD to give us access to serving women, which is not usually done. And we had a 2-week opportunity to do a questionnaire, which the MOD were going to promote on their intranet site. But that was 2 weeks before Christmas. We thought we'd get about 600 returns. We pulled on our own networks, we pulled on our own veterans networks and our own serving women's networks. We got 4,000 in a 2-week period. We had no idea what was coming down the tracks. And what we didn't ask, which we would have done now, is of those 62% that had experienced abuse, how many had experienced sexual abuse, how many were alleging they'd experienced rape. We didn't ask that because, quite frankly, Gloria, we had no idea what we were heading into.
Were you subject to bullying, harassment or worse when you were serving?
I was in the army in the 80s and it was tough, absolutely tough. You'd be sworn at, you'd be shouted at. But that was a different social context in the 80s. I didn't actually see any abuse or anything that I thought of as abuse at the time. I look back now and think, yes, they used to drop medicine balls on your stomach to make sure that you firmed your muscles up. Actually...
Medicine balls?
Heavy sports balls.
Right.
It's showing my age now. And they used to drop them on your stomach to try and tighten your muscles up. Well, that would be seen as abuse now, but it wasn't back in the 80s. So with hindsight and reflection back 40-odd years, probably did, but it didn't register at the time and it wasn't significant enough to make an impact.
You have referred to a misogynistic culture in the armed forces. Does that mean the armed forces are institutionally sexist?
The Chief of Defence Staff at the time, Nick Carter, certainly really didn't help with his comments about laddish behaviour.
Do you want to just explain those?
Yes, so the Chief of Defence Staff is the top person in the military, and when all this evidence was starting to come out, he was in his position then, he's now left, and he said, well, you know, it's laddish behaviour, sort of what to expect. That doesn't help. And actually that reaffirms to me that there's a culture, there's a cultural problem here in the military. And it's an old institution, male-dominated. I would expect nothing else. But that doesn't mean we don't try and change it now, because times have changed. 50% of the population are women, you know, and recruitment is low. Recruitment is around 12% of women. There's targets now to increase that recruitment to 30% by 2030. I think the RAF have gone further, to 40% by 2030. So we really need to change that culture if women are going to be encouraged to go into this, what is a fantastic career, where all opportunities are open, but more importantly, to stay and make it a lifelong career, not just stay 4 years or 8 years is the average. So we need to change that. There is a misogynistic culture, but it's changing.
Why did you leave?
I left because I married a soldier. A lot of people are dual serving, as you might expect. And in the 80s, there was no way that 2 careers could have been followed whilst a marriage pursued.
So you said the culture needs to change. How?
It's not going to change overnight. And it needs to be not just a top-down approach, it needs to be a bottom-up approach. There's a lot of training going on, as we had 34 odd recommendations. Most of those were taken on by the MOD, ranging from body armour to something else. Another story that really will stick in my mind is that a woman phoned up and she said, because we spoke to most and met quite a few of the people submitting evidence, and she said she was out in Afghan and she was in a foxhole, she was in a firing position, and she had body armour on, which is made for a man. So it didn't fit across the boobs, it didn't fit across the hips, it was up on one side, she had a gap here, she was exposed, and she was firing, she had a bun in her hair, a helmet was tipped, and she was completely compromised. And no one had ever thought to say, well, why is that body armour not made for a woman?
Is it now?
Yes.
Right.
As a result of the report. Another one was on operations. Women were quite often being caught short for sanitary products. And although there is a box there for emergencies, you have to ask your commanding officer for the key to the box. Well, your commanding officer is usually a man.
Yeah.
Oh, you know, what's going on? So I think what my report did was really jolt the MOD and say, come on, guys and girls, wake up. Wake up.
Amazing achievements. There's one thing that you couldn't achieve. You disagreed with ministers over whether the most serious charges facing troops, including rape and sexual assault, you think those cases should be removed from military courts and put through into the civilian system. First of all, why is that important?
If you look at the statistics, and we did some number crunching as part of this report, that you are 4 to 6 times less likely to get a conviction for rape in a military court than you are in a civilian court. 4 to 6 times less likely. That's using MOJ data. That's using the better data. CPS data is actually worse. I'm doing a bit of number crunching now to see whether things have changed. I don't think they've changed that much. So that in itself speaks volumes. What's going wrong there? Couple that with all the evidence we had about cover-up, chain of command being perpetrators, people being sent home or told to have a bath, being sent home on a bit of leave for a few weeks, coupled with the evidence that only 16% of women who had experienced sexual assault were having forensic evidence taken within the 14-day window. Well, there's no surprise that you can't get a conviction when you haven't got the evidence, because people, commanding officers, are saying, well, perhaps go home and have a bath or take some paracetamol and see how you feel. So
that's criminal.
Also as well, that women weren't in the middle of this process. There was no support for victims. So you'd face your perpetrator in the cookhouse. You'd be working alongside your perpetrator. They often were males in a network. And, they sort of gang up on you. So you then became the perpetrator. There was counterclaims and countersuing. So put all that together, which is the evidence we found in our report. No, I'd really still believe to this day it should be removed from the military justice system into the civilian justice system, just so women can have justice. And it's not woking up the military, which is what I've been criticised for doing. I'm the most least woke person you'll ever find. It's about British values of justice and fairness and equality.
How are you going to make it happen? Where next for the campaign?
Well, there's a couple of things. This is what I do in Parliament. This is my niche. This is my duty as the first female in Parliament to ever have had a military background, according to library records. There's no one else done that. Those 4,106 women, I have a duty towards because of the position I found myself in. So I'm going to continue to pursue this. I voted against the government on the Armed Forces Bill over this and was stood down as a PPS for the Foreign Secretary at the time. I will continue to do this because this is why I'm here. We're going to have a review of progress with the Defence Select Committee towards Christmas. A few days ago, I set up an APPG, an all-party parliamentary group for women in defence. This is another avenue in which I can keep this going. I was a minister for a short while. That was great because, I really had influence then to really press the MOD to say, what are you doing? What's your timescales? Who's delivering what and when? I'm not in that position anymore, so I've got to find different avenues to do that. So I will just keep going for as long as I can.
You're tough. You're no nonsense, you speak your mind. Part of the job, part of the territory of being an MP, often abuse comes alongside it. Has anyone tried to mess with you?
Oh, I get abuse all the time. All the time. So Wrexham didn't get the Levelling Up Fund bid for the second time, and I had extra security for around 6 days because of the abuse.
Extra security?
Yes, police security, police monitoring. We had to get parliamentary police involved because of death threats. Sadly, it is part of the territory, particularly for a woman. And you work hard, Gloria, you work really, really hard for your constituency, as do my team. None of us want to do anyone any harm. We always want to better what we're doing, better Wrexham, make it better, help the people of Wrexham. And then when you get death threats, you just think, why? So the strategy is from day one that I knew it would demoralise me over time, even someone as strong as myself. I've been a nurse and social worker for 27 years, so I'm not easily offended, and I've got quite thick skin. Other women haven't. Other people haven't. So I put a strategy in place from day one that I would not look at my social media. I transmit, but I don't receive. I have someone else to do that for me. And they will give me threads of what's going on to see whether I need to do anything. Am I missing anything that Wrexham needs that I haven't picked up on? But I don't read those messages.
So you've just had police, parliamentary security accompanying you for, did you say?
6 days. It was
6 days.
4 days and 2 days, given the threats.
And that was?
A few months ago.
A few months ago. Is that the worst it's been? Have you had to take any other security measures to keep yourself safe?
Yes, I have quite a few security measures. I have had death threats at the house.
What, posted?
Oh no, someone banging on the windows threatening
What?
to kill me.
What?
Yeah.
I don't think I've ever heard of any MP having someone actually come to your home, bang on your window.
Well, I thought, to be honest, I could de-escalate it, being a social worker. It didn't go well. So we had to call the police, yeah. And I was there alone as well. Yeah.
Did the police come quickly?
They did. They were fantastic. North Wales Police, hats off to them. They are really supportive.
I think you're brilliant. I think you're a breath of fresh air to Parliament. Thank you, Sarah Atherton.
Thank you.